Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Fireside Chat with Shruti Kapoor. In these Fireside Chats, I bring inspirational people from the community who share not just their successes and the things that are going well in their life and their career, but also the things that tried to hold them back and how they overcame it. And the goal of these Fireside Chats is to make you feel that whenever you face your struggles, you're not alone. Because somebody like me, I feel like whenever I feel a struggle or whenever I'm going through a hard time, I feel like shit, everyone's doing great and I'm the only one who's feeling this way and I'm just an imposter. But through these Fireside Chats, I want you to know that everyone in the industry has gone through the same hardships that you probably are going through. Today's guest is a really special friend of mine, and he's the kind of person who's always supported other people. He's also the kind of person who also encouraged me to get on this content creation journey. And one of the big things that I learned from him is about consistency. He's the kind of person who's always empathetic towards other people and always supports other people. I'm very excited to announce my guest, Jason Lengstorf. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
It's so good to see you in person.
It's great to see you as well.
This is so nice. Like, we're doing this for the first time in person, and you get to be my first in-person guest.
Yes, I do love in person. It's so much nicer to talk live, you know?
Yeah, I can see your expression.
Right.
I can see if I'm asking you difficult questions.
We don't have a 100 millisecond delay where we talk on top of each other, yeah.
Yes. Although I might be talking on top of each other because that's just how I do. I have no awareness. But speaking of that, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Jason Langsdorf. I help companies make better video at all levels of the from awareness down through task-based tutorial kind of doc stuff. And I've been doing that for the last couple of years. Prior to that, I worked as an executive at Netlify. I have also worked as a front-end architect at companies like IBM. And, I've been doing this for about a little over 20 years now.
Wow. That is a long time.
Yeah.
I think I met you first in person at React India.
Mm-hmm.
And we shared a cup of chai together.
I still have my contact photo for you is a photo from React India.
Oh, yeah?
Where we were like got surprised by something and you're making a face. It's like
I remember that exactly. I think one thing that I remember from you, which I still take away during conferences, is like you were at the conference and you were listening to these like talks, and then you were making notes of what people were talking about. And as they were talking about, you were like sharing and tweeting it out. And I thought that was such a great way of like not just remembering what people are talking, but also sharing it with the rest of the community.
I mean, I think when you put all the time into going and making a talk, and you've made these slides, and you're trying to go connect with people. If you get off stage and like nobody said anything about it, it's like it's such a bummer.
Yeah.
And so I try to make sure that at least one person is paying attention.
Oh, that is so sweet. And I think that's the kind of vibe I get from you. You're like always there to support people. I remember all of your talks have always talked about like the humane side of being a developer. So actually, let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about the key theme in your talks and kind of like I think your newsletters speak to the same thing. It's usually adding like a humane part to it, empathizing with the people. Tell us a little bit about it.
I think a lot of people there's a ton of content about how to be better at coding.
Yeah.
And I ultimately think that there's a point of diminishing returns with this, where you get better at coding until you can solve most problems that get assigned to you.
Yeah.
And after that point, you can build more expertise, and you will just by doing the craft.
Yeah.
But there's not much else to like actively learn. It's more stuff you're going to pick up through experience.
Right.
And so I'm so far away from the beginning of my technical journey. I've been doing it for 20 years. So I have a really hard time when I try to explain a concept to somebody who's a true beginner, because I can't remember what it's like to not know this stuff. It's just kind of, I'm the fish in the water. I don't even notice that it's there.
Right.
And so instead, what I've been realizing is that the content we don't have is there are only a handful of people who talk about the skills that get you further than senior engineer. And so once you've built up that like core technical competence, if you want to go further, it's not about getting better at coding anymore. It's about getting better at communication. It's about getting better at helping other people get better at coding. It's about communicating to people who aren't engineers. Like, how can you take a technical thing you want to build and convince somebody who works in sales that it's the right way to spend our time, or somebody who works in product, or somebody in leadership, because that's where you start to become staff, principal, and beyond. Is you're now able to affect not just what you can do, but what everybody around you can do. And all of that is interpersonal skill. It's now communication. It's your ability to empathize with somebody, your ability to understand disciplines that aren't code. That's how we really make big impacts.
Yeah. I think you hit like a really good point there, which is like when you're at the senior level, or even senior and below, it's like what you can do, like what you can build. But as you go above that, it's enabling other people and like lifting the team with you. And that's how you can get to staff, because now you're like increasing your sphere of influence. It's not just your team or the code that you build, but it's also how you like empower other teams, and how you like communicate what you're doing, and kind of like sell what you are doing to other team as well, like convince them that what you're doing is important.
Right.
And that's what kind of gets you in a leadership position.
Yeah, or if you don't want to be in a management or leadership position, it's what makes you the company's most trusted IC.
Right.
Individual contributor, if you don't know what IC is.
Right. I'm curious, like, where did you feel, or how did you feel like there was a need for this kind of message to show or like share? Was it somebody who you felt was kind of struggling as a senior to staff transition, or is it something that you felt throughout your career, something you've been doing?
I think it was it's a little bit of all of it. Where it most stood out to me was when I joined IBM. I never worked at a company that large before. I mean, I don't think anybody's worked at a company that large unless you've worked at IBM. They've got their employees there are more employees at IBM than there are people living in like Liechtenstein. It's like over 400,000 employees.
What?
So it's an enormous company with, I worked on IBM Cloud, and my product alone had 35 engineering teams.
Oh, wow.
And so each of those teams owns an individual thing: the billing dashboard, the account dashboard, your apps, your whatever, the back-end services that make those things run. And so when I came in as a front-end architect, and the job that I was doing was helping them kind of modernize some of their stack, because it had grown over the course of many years, and people had sort of like built on top of older code. And so, just through the natural process of companies needing to ship things, there were a lot of things that had just gotten a little bit slow. Like you had, the original thing was built in Backbone, and then they didn't have time to like rebuild the Backbone thing, but the new stuff was built in React. So you had like loading Backbone to then load React, and just little things that make things slow. And so my first project was clean that up. So I sat down, and in like 6 weeks, we'd rebuilt it. My team had just kind of rebuilt the thing. We had a more modern React stack. We had like a 2,800% speed performance increase on the page. And I was like, great, done.
Yeah.
We're geniuses. We've solved this problem. Nobody wanted to use it. Nobody was interested in using it. And so I kept showing people the code, and I was like, but no, look how good this is. Like, this is, you should be using this. Why don't you want to use this? And I was doing the typical like senior dev thing. I would beat people over the head with my solution. Like, look at this code. Yeah. This code is beautiful. Why don't you
look at how performant.
Right? And people were just like, nah, we don't, whatever. That's not how we do things. Oh. And I sat down with, I think he was an SVP. And I said, he used to be an engineer, and I was like, why? What is going wrong? Like, why aren't people interested in building better code here? And he said, that's not what you're telling them. You're showing them extra work. Like, these are people who work a 40-hour week, and they do not want to be on pager duty. They do not want to get called back into the office. They want to be done. And so when you show them, look, new, shiny, exciting, they're not interested in excitement. So it suddenly I realized I have to kind of empathize with them. These are folks who get, they work on systems that are old and fragile. And lots of people before me have come in and said, use the new thing will save you. And they believed them. Yeah. And it became one more layer on the stack that they now have to support. Yeah. And so they get paged all the time. Things are super brittle, and they're just tired. They don't want to deal with it anymore.
Right.
So when I started empathizing with where they're coming from, I realized I changed the way that I talked about it. I wasn't talking about my tech anymore. I was talking about removing the layers of tech that they had to support now. I was saying, look, what I'm saying is, right now, the way this works is here's this layer, this layer, this layer, this layer. You have to support all 4 of these, right? And they would say, yeah. I'm like, okay. So my proposal takes this layer, which is the modern layer, and it removes these 3 layers, and then this little bit of code here stitches it all together. So now you only have 1 layer to support, and it's the modern stuff that you're working on right now. And then suddenly they were like, wait, so this goes away? I was like, yeah. Okay, but what replaces it? I was like, this little bit of code. Most of this is stuff that was duplicated over the years because you were building new layers.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like, okay, now we're talking.
Now we get it.
So now we're taking work off their plates instead of showing them my cool new tech.
Yeah.
Right. And so just by shifting that perspective, and it was this light bulb moment for me because I realized that that's what all of us are doing. We all are trying to solve our immediate problems. And for a lot of us, like for me, in that stage of my career, my immediate problem is what's fun to build. And so that's the itch I'm trying to scratch is what's fun for me. I want to build something cool and new and exciting.
Yeah.
The vast majority of professional engineers in bigger companies do not want new or exciting or fun. They want boring, dependable.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to shift the way that I was thinking about things and remember who I'm talking to. And then that started the process of realizing that, okay, if that's how the engineers feel, what does the product team feel? Because I'm not battling product. Why do engineers feel like they're battling product all the time? But we're both in the same business. We want to build a good product that people like enough that they want to continue using it and hopefully like enough to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same goal. Product people have one set of language that they use to talk about it. Engineers have another one. But when I talk about wanting to clean up technical debt, the product folks are like, we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
But then the product folks are saying the app feels janky, the app feels slow, the users are unhappy.
It takes so long to ship.
They're talking about technical debt.
Right.
So wait, if I, instead of saying, give me like 2 sprints to clean up technical debt, say, hey, can we do like a jank cleanup run? Let's just go clean up the jank here. Here's all the reports you wrote about where users are unhappy. Let's do a jank cleanup. And they go, yeah, we need to do that because the users hate this. I get to go clean up my technical debt. They get to get rid of the jank. We're all speaking the same language. We're all happy. Right. So it was when I started to learn that it's not that we disagree on what needs to be done.
Yeah.
It's that we don't use the same language to describe those goals.
Yeah.
If you learn enough about product to understand what their goals are, you can just say the technical thing you want to do in their language and you both win.
Right.
It's no longer a battle. You're just on the same team.
Right. I think one point that you highlighted is like, when you thought about the user, which is in your case, would be the person who's maintaining it, and you put them in the center of what you are doing and try to kind of frame the story for them, it made it so much easier and you spoke the same language. And I think a lot of us kind of like forget that we're building this stuff for somebody at the end of the cycle, right?
Yes.
So like keeping that person in mind, and like remembering that they don't care if you use React or Angular. They just want to make sure that their life is easier or at least not worse because of your code, right? I think that is so important.
Yeah, I think a lot of us treat our coding the way that we treat like the crossword or Sudoku. It's a puzzle for us to solve.
Yeah, which it is.
And at the end, when you finish a Sudoku, you just throw it away.
Right. Next.
Right. But and the problem is that, if we treat it like that and we're not thinking about who has to deal with it at the end of the day, then we can be messy about it. We can cross things out and ruin the puzzle. Yeah. And then when we hand it off, we're like, we don't care anymore. Yeah. Right. But that's your problem now.
Yeah.
But I think I make the joke a lot that a lot of us are hobbyist devs as well as professional devs. You can't do your hobby at work.
Oh, yeah.
Like, work is work and your hobby is your hobby. And when I'm at home, when it's not for business, I'm trying to hack on whatever I can. I'm like, oh, can I make WebSockets work with this thing and that thing? And it's janky and it's held together with popsicle sticks. And but I feel I solved the puzzle. Right?
Yeah.
At work, though, I'm reaching for the most tried and true solution. No surprises, no excitement. The most boring thing I can because I want to get the work done and just be done with it and never have to go back and maintain it.
Yeah. Oh, that is so true. Hobbyist engineers and professional engineers, sometimes you do both of them at work, but separate it out.
Right.
I think that makes a lot of sense because that is the reason why all of these big companies, they choose the most established libraries like React. And when we build our own blog sites, we go for the shiny new things like Astro or Svelte. Even though they're not as shiny anymore, but
yeah, those are becoming pretty production at this point.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like thinking about the user and then kind of like separating your hobby coding from your work coding, because work needs something stable. And I think that makes sense because somebody else has to maintain it if it's not you.
Right. And there's a trap you can fall into as well, where if you build something that's fun and exciting for work, your job is now to maintain the thing that you built, and you're no longer the dev who gets to build new things. You're the dev who maintains the thing that you build. Yeah. And that sucks because nobody can help you when you do it new and shiny and exciting because nobody knows how it works.
Yeah.
Right. So now you're the only person in the company. You get the pager duty, you get the phone calls, you get the Slack DMs, and you lose what the joy was in that company in the first place because all of your time goes to this exciting new thing you built.
Yeah.
And, it's not exciting once you're maintaining it.
Yeah, totally.
So you can kind of accidentally like talk yourself out of a job if you're not thinking about the outcomes and just thinking about how fun it is to build.
Yeah. On the plus side, there is job security.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I think the flip side though is I've seen a lot of people quit their jobs because they cornered themselves into being the maintainer for something that they didn't want to maintain anymore, and then the company gets left holding the bag. And usually there's like one person who's willing to be the archaeologist that like digs down and figures out how the code works, and then that person becomes the like designated pager duty person. Because they don't know how to train, because it's, the old joke, if you don't use a framework, you're building a framework. It's the same with most of this exciting tech. If you don't use something established, you're establishing something that other people have to learn. Yeah. And that just, it becomes a little bit of a trap. And I think we all think that when we're building something new that it won't need maintenance and that we'll get it exactly right and it'll be perfect forever. But that's just not how reality works. And so, when you're in that position, you got to be empathetic to the fact that if anything lives longer than 6 months, it's going to need maintenance. And if you don't think about maintenance when you're building it and use something that's got great docs, that's got a great community, that's got universal standards that like the community at large understands and can Google, you are going to have to create all of those things or you're the only person who can work on it.
Right. Yeah, digging yourself a hole. Yeah. So you worked at IBM for a long time.
Not a long time. I was there for a couple of years.
Couple of years. Yeah. That's a long time.
I guess in startup land, that's like a lifetime.
A couple of years is like, okay, you were there for an established time. But whatever. So you were there for a couple of years. And then after that, you went to Netlify.
To Gatsby at first.
Gatsby, that's right. And you were there at Gatsby as an engineer.
I joined they hired me as like a principal engineer. Okay. But I didn't have a role. They just kind of, in retrospect, this may be why Gatsby didn't work out, but they just hired people because they knew they were good engineers. They didn't have job descriptions. They didn't have goals. So we sort of got together. I was one of the first, I think, somewhere around like 5th or 6th employee. I don't know. Wow. That's super but we all got together and we were like, all right, what are we building? And Gatsby, the framework existed. But we had to plan like what comes after, what exists now, what's on the feature roadmap, what do people actually want. But then we also had to build out the company. So what's the company offering? How do we engage with our audience? How do we make people from like fans of an open source project into customers that want to pay for something? And the big thing I realized was there was no system around how we took care of the open source contributors, which was the only thing that Gatsby had that was a strong advantage. Because, Gatsby and any of these tools, they're all interesting technical things. Yeah. But without a community, they don't have reach. And so Gatsby had this great community of people who were building plugins and adapters and all the things we needed so that you could use anything inside of Gatsby. And we weren't really doing anything other than just saying like, hey, thanks. Right. So this was, I accidentally got into DevRel at Gatsby and I built their DevRel program because I realized the core risk for us was if we didn't nurture that community, they were going to go somewhere else. Right. And when I'm not going to take credit for this, around the time I left, Gatsby stopped investing in that and we saw the fallout. Like, I mean, there were some other things that happened that caused Gatsby to lose face even faster. But when they stopped actively investing, like they shut down the part where you would get automatic OSS, you'd become part of the org so that you had like, access to certain things. Like we still had lockdown. You couldn't just like merge anything you wanted, but you had access. You were you had discussions and stuff like that. And we would give everybody a t-shirt when they submitted a PR. Oh, I remember that. There was like little things like that that just made you feel like you were part of the Gatsby community. They stopped investing in that. And pretty shortly after, that all kind of faded away. Like the community slowed down, people weren't as interested anymore, and it just kind of turned into like another project.
Yeah.
And I think they lost ground pretty steadily because of that.
Right. So what was the big takeaway there? You said there was like a dedicated community or fan base, like, did they lose them? Or like for somebody who's listening, this could be an advice that if they're building their own open source library, how do you take the community and kind of convert it into paying users? What was kind of the takeaway there?
I think the biggest thing is that in tech, we all want to know where we belong. Like which community is our community.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a couple approaches that we see, and I won't name names because I don't want to make it weird, but there are some companies that have an approach to community that's like, we're the cool kids and you're not allowed in here because you're not as cool as us. And so being part of that group feels very exclusive. Like you're invited to the secret room. And that works for the people who are in, but for the people who don't feel like they're in, they don't feel like they're allowed, like they're imposters if they use the thing. So with Gatsby, the approach that we took instead was we just straight, like, you belong here. You want to write a single line of docs, you're an OSS contributor, welcome. We want you here. You're a first day coder and Gatsby's the project you want to start with, welcome, you belong here. Right. And so it was very much about making sure that it was the place for people to go. We wanted you there. We wanted you with us. We wanted you engaged.
Yeah.
And what we saw was that it created a very like open and welcoming and non-toxic, like you didn't get the gatekeeping around Gatsby. People were stoked when somebody new showed up. And I think that what my takeaway from that is that if you have to model the behavior you want to see in your community. And I think we've seen with, Twitter drama and things like that, where people or communities they've got a more edgy, more, authoritative, more like cool, I'm cooler than you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when the community starts to act like that as well, then you find the creators or the companies having to say like, well, that's not what our community is about. It's like, you showed them that. You taught them how to behave.
Right.
The fact that they took it further than you would is unfortunate, and that's not your fault.
Yeah.
But you set the precedent that we treat people poorly if they're part of the out group, right? You set the precedent that we talk down to projects that we don't respect, right?
Yeah.
So there's this whole thing about like how people act, and then that teaches the community what's allowed and what's not allowed. So my standing order at Gatsby is we don't punch. It's not about punching up or punching down. It's about not punching at all. We always welcome people in. The only thing we don't tolerate is people who come in and do the things that we've said we don't do. Like if somebody comes in bullying, you're out, right? If somebody comes in and they've got something to say about what somebody looks like or what somebody sounds like, get them out. They're done. And what we noticed was that very, very few of those people showed up because they'd come in and they'd see how welcoming the community was. And they'd either change their tune and they'd suddenly be like active, supportive members of the community, or they'd go, oh, I don't belong here. Right. I want to be mean. Like this, and this isn't a place for mean people.
Right.
And so we didn't have to moderate very heavily because we were modeling the behavior. And I think that modeling is better than moderation in almost every sense of the word, because typically people mirror the folks they see as the leaders of the movement.
Yeah.
So just be the person you want your community to be.
Right.
And suddenly you get a great community.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is so powerful. Like model the behavior that you want your community to see. And I think that's not just true for, like open source community, but community at workplace as well. If you are the person in charge, or even if you're not in charge, you're like the person part of the team, you still have a role to play. And if you're modeling like kind behavior, welcoming behavior, everybody else around you is going to be that way. And people who are not that way are going to be the ones who are going to be seen out instead of other way around.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about this in leadership roles a lot, where if you want your team to be a team that takes time off and that isn't stressed out and that speaks up about problems, you have to take time off and you have to speak up about problems and you have to protect them when they do speak up. And if they offer criticism, you have to accept that criticism and then change. You can't get defensive, right? Like all of those things have to happen. They have to come from you.
Right.
If I'm in when I was a VP, I couldn't go to my team and say, act like this. And then they would say, okay, we'll act like that. They would look at how I acted and they'd use my behavior to determine what was allowed. So if I'm in people's DMs, bullying them into staying late. Hey, can you get me that project by tomorrow? I know it's a Sunday. I'm really sorry. Like, they see that and they would mimic that, right?
Yeah.
So instead, I had to be the person who, if somebody came into Slack on a Sunday, it's like, get out of here. It's a Sunday. We'll talk about this tomorrow.
Right.
None of this stuff matters, right? Like, we're moving dots on a screen. This isn't critical.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they would see that and they would go, oh, I'm allowed to unplug.
Yeah.
You know, hey, it's 7 p.m. for you. Get off the computer. Like, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? That sort of stuff is really important.
It's so important.
And if you see the leadership do it, then it gives everybody else permission to create that culture.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the unlimited PTO thing. Like, it's such a double-edged sword, because if leadership models a no time off, everything is important, everything is on fire, then you'll notice that companies, they have unlimited PTO and nobody's taking it. They'll take like 2 days a year, right?
Yeah.
But if you have an unlimited PTO policy and the leaders, they're monitoring, hey, it's Q2 already and you haven't taken any time off. Like, when do you want to schedule a vacation?
Yeah.
Right? That's suddenly, okay, wait, I'm supposed to take this.
Right.
I'm allowed to take this. And then when they go, you redirect their email to your inbox so they don't even see it. Stuff like that, right? We had somebody who really couldn't not look at Slack. We just deactivated their account while they were on vacation. We were like, we'll send you an invite when you get back, right? Because it's just that little stuff that shows people that this is okay. It's okay to be disconnected. It's all right. We'll be fine without you.
Yeah. I think that's such a powerful thing, like telling people it's okay to take time off, because I work at an unlimited PTO company as well, and I have worked before as well. And you're so right. Like, people mimic what their leaders are doing, what their managers are doing. And if the manager is the kind of person who takes like a few weeks every quarter, the team also does that. And, the team understands that it's okay to prioritize your family over work. And we're just moving pixels on the screen. It's just boxes left and right. We're not doing like life-breaking things or
we're not curing cancer. We're not solving climate change. We're drawing rectangles.
Yeah.
It's okay.
We're like changing performance of a site that, even if it's slow, people will still get by. It's not like medically changing.
Right.
So you were at Gatsby for a while, and you moved to Netlify as a VP, and you worked there for a long time, if I remember.
It was almost 3 years, I think.
3 years.
2019 to 2020. Yeah, about 3 years.
Okay. And you were working at Netlify as 2 VPs. So tell me a little bit about that. And also tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So I got hired, Sarah Drasner. As I was leaving Gatsby, my intention was to go independent again. And as I was leaving, Sarah Drasner sent me a message. She was like, I want you to come work at Netlify. And like, I always make the joke that if Sarah Drasner says, come work with me, you just say yes.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't do that. I tried to say no, right? And I found out later that she sent me that message and I said no. And she told her husband, Dizzy, she's like, just watch, I'll get it. And then she told him exactly how it was going to work. And that's exactly how it worked, right? Oh. Because, she makes a very good case. Like, she's very, very good at what she does. But, so she talked me into coming over, and she was right. It was wonderful. I joined as a principal developer experience engineer. That was the first job that I had. And then when Sarah had the opportunity to go over to Google, she left Netlify and ended up, she's the senior director of web and everything. Like, she runs like a lot at Google now.
I saw.
As she left, she moved me. She like kind of groomed me to be in the position. So she got me prepared to become the VP, and as she left, she moved me in. And so I worked as the VP there of developer experience. But then another 6 months or so later, our VP of marketing left. And when our VP of marketing left, we didn't immediately have somebody to take the role. And so the leadership team said, like, you can handle this, right? And I was like, no, I can't. But they were like, well, you're the best that we have right now. So can you manage it while we hire the new replacement? I was like, okay, I'll do my best. And so
you said no, but here's it anyway.
I mean, it's like one of those really upsetting things where I think this is the privilege of being a white dude is like, I say I can't do it, and people say, "Oh, you're so humble. That's why you're
so honest. We love you.
Right.
Please do more."
That was straight up what happened. Is they were like, "Can you do this?" And I was like, "I am fully unqualified." They're like, "You're so humble. You can handle this." Right? But so I did that for a little while, and then they did end up hiring in marketing leadership, which was great. But around the same time that they did that, there was some strategic stuff that I wasn't really excited about. And I had been doing a lot of stuff leaning toward video, and I was pushing Netlify to go that route. I thought that, we should do a lot more around like brand awareness, marketing campaigns, like really thinking about how do we tell good stories to developers to let them know they belong in this community. Like we are your people, come hang out with us, right? That was my thought. And it just wasn't aligned with where everybody was going. So I decided that I was going to go independent like I had planned before.
Right.
And I, took a couple contracts, and I'd been doing Learn with Jason since 2018. And I started it when I was at Gatsby. But I made sure that I set it up as a separate entity. So I owned Learn with Jason, but I was doing it to help Gatsby. And that was sort of how we...
Interesting.
And so when I went to Netlify, it was the same thing. Learn with Jason is my show, but I'll make sure that it's done with a lot of support for Netlify, and that was why they hired me. And then when I took the VP role, it was the same thing. Well, I'm not going to stop doing it,
right? But
I'll make sure that it continually promotes Netlify,
right?
And so when I went indie, I had sponsorship, I had some contracts, I was able to replace I think about 60, maybe a little more % of my income, right out of the gate.
Oh, okay.
And then I had a couple leads on contracts. Like this is sort of where there was this perfect storm of I was talking to people. They were saying they needed what I do. I was getting a little pushback on some of the strategic stuff I wanted to do at Netlify. And so a couple people were like, well, if you want to do that with us, I was like, well, I definitely can't do that on the side. Like it's way too much work. But I was like, well, wait, if I were to leave, you still want to do that contract? And they said, yeah. I was like, all right, let me put in my notice, fired up the contract. And then ever since then, I've been running Learn with Jason as a consultancy. And I do that full time where I partner with companies to help them make just better media strategy, basically.
Right. So tell me about how that's going. That sounds like, for me, like that sounds like the dream, working for myself, but also it's very scary because you were at a VP position, 2 VP positions, and then you left it to start your own thing. That must have come with like a lot of nervousness and a lot of like questions just in your head.
Yeah.
Or did you kind of like go for it, or like did you have any challenges while going for it?
I mean, I had and still have a lot of challenges because, like a job is a steady paycheck.
Yeah.
You get paid every 2 weeks and you know how much money you're going to make, and you can plan around that.
Yeah.
This job, I make more money sometimes and I make no money other times. And so I'll have a month where I'll make 3 times what I used to make in a month at Netlify, which, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot, yeah.
But then the next month I don't land any new contracts. And so I'll make like $1,500. And then I have to make sure that I'm like saving and building up a slush fund so that when I have a dry month, I'm able to survive, basically. And that's really challenging because, when you suddenly have like $15,000 that you didn't need this month sitting somewhere, you're like, oh, maybe I should like remodel that bathroom, right? But if you do that, then next month you don't sell anything and you're like, shit, I can't pay rent.
Yeah.
So
I can't buy groceries.
Right. So that's really challenging. And then I think the other part that gets hidden with a lot of this is what people see is what content creators release. You see me, you see Aaron Francis, you see Cassidy, like we make videos. And so you see the videos, you see the interviews, you see us on stage. We spend, well, I won't speak for them. I spend probably 50% or more of my time in sales calls. So I'm having meetings, I'm talking to companies about their strategy, I'm writing proposals, I'm trying to convince them that this is the right choice. And it is a huge amount of the time that I spend. And it is really hard because people tell you no all the time. People tell you that what they don't need what you do.
Right.
So it'll, with that being said, I would not trade this job. I love this job. Like I'm having more fun now than I've ever had in my entire career.
Oh.
But it comes with a different set of demands. You know, like the trade-off is, when I was working at other companies, the problems that came in were problems that I could only partially solve. Because I reported to a CEO, there were other departments that made other decisions, and I can't unilaterally do anything.
Right.
And that gets really frustrating. And then there's also things that, like, when you have employees, when you have managers and bosses, you can't be fully transparent because, like, if somebody said, like, if you got 2 people on your team and one of them asks you for something, and that thing that they ask for is directly opposed to the thing this person asked for, you can't go tell them like, well, so-and-so wants the other thing, so we can't do that, right? Because then they'll start fighting each other. So you just have to say no to both of them with no context. Like, it's just not aligned with strategy right now. We can't do that. And they go, well, why? And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't share the details. And so now you're like, you got to play these weird political games. You can't just be like open, you know? And so independent, I can be fully open. I can be fully transparent at my own risk. I can choose how much I share, but I can't like put somebody else's company at risk. I can't pit employees against each other because I don't have those. So it's very much like you lose the bureaucracy, you lose the stress of like other people depending on you, other people dictating your actions and what you can and can't work on. You gain the stress of now being in charge of everything. Everything that happens is your fault. Right. Everything that goes well is also your fault. So you get a lot of glory. You get to, you know, you get to celebrate a lot of wins. But then when things are hard, you don't have somebody you can say, well, if somebody would have just let me do my job. No, it was me. I'm the one who didn't let me do my job. So I'm the problem.
Right. Hey. It's me.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like a lot of stress, but a lot of like reward. But, you know, like you're the person responsible for making the calls and making sure that there is food on the plate tomorrow. Because, you know, there isn't going to be a project that's coming your way steadily. You know, your manager's not going to like tell you and put you on a new project. You're going to have to find that project for you.
And I can't just like wait and get my percentage bonus every year. Like if I don't go out and do the work, no more money comes in. There's no like rest invest here. There's no wait for the 3% cost of living increase. I got to be able to raise my own prices and then convince people to pay them. And so the benefit, of course, is that like I heard Shonda Person describe this as unbounded income. There's not really a ceiling on what you can make in tech. So we sort of get to rewrite the rules because it's a young enough industry that if you can go to an AI company and convince them to pay you millions of dollars a year, some of them might do it, right? And you just got to find the right company that wants what you do. And it's the same with content. If you line up with companies that share the values and goals that you have, they will find the budget to make it work. And then you get to make dope stuff with people that are enjoying it and for an audience that's really excited to see it, and everybody's happy. But it's also like you got to go find those people. You got to go make the thing. You got to go sell the project. You got to build the crew and make sure it gets edited and released on time and do all the follow through. Because if you skip any of those steps, you don't get the outcome you wanted. And then that makes it look like you're not able to get the things done, which makes it harder to sell the next project. So it's this sort of momentum thing where you have to stay moving. And when you take breaks, they have to be very deliberate. And that's harder because like at Netlify, or any of my other jobs, I could say, okay, I'm getting stressed out. I need to take a week off. So in 2 weeks, I'm just going to leave. Right. And right now, if I do that, I have to be so intentional about, okay, so the editors have what they need. And then I've got this project in the mo. I've got this thing queued up and I've got these emails. I send an email to all my leads to let them know, like, I'm going to be out for a little bit, but I'm still here. Like, you know, if I don't do all those steps, then I might lose a couple deals that were almost closed because I'm off the grid. Or, you know, like right now I'm traveling a lot, right? And I'm trying to check my email and make sure that I'm keeping up with people. Because if I miss it, if I leave somebody on red for a week, they may go, oh, well, you're not serious about this, right? So it's really challenging to know that you have to be able to juggle to do this. But I also, I mean, in fairness, I probably don't work more than like 45 hours a week anyways, even with all the chaos of all this.
That's really inspiring story, but also like I think you shared like such a transparent view of what it is like to run your own thing, like all the stress that's involved, all the work that's involved. It's not as glorious as it seems. You know, people talk about it like, I'm doing my own thing, and you may think like they're making millions of dollars, but there's also like so much work that goes behind the scenes.
Right.
And I think as a final closing note, I'll ask you one final question, which is for somebody who's wanting to do something similar, like start their own thing, what is a piece of advice you would give them?
Don't overcomplicate it. Like, I think a thing that I did and still do is if I have an idea, I'll think of what my ideal end result would be. And it's almost all, I mean, now I know enough about the production process that I'm like, oh, well, I want to get, a costume department, a makeup department. I want to have I'll hire this colorist and I'll get this thing and I'll get that thing. And suddenly I've made this project into something where I'm going to need 35 people involved, and I'm going to need a huge budget, and I'm going to need to rent locations. I'm going to need to fly people in. And I'm like, what if I just made it? Right. And so I think that, a lot of times we get stressed out because we're like, well, I need the right camera. I need the right microphone. I need a better place to film. I need, a bigger audience before I ask this person to join my podcast or whatever it is. But your iPhone is good enough.
Yeah.
Right. And your whatever the microphone on your MacBook Pro is fine.
Decent enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you will get better results if you invest in your equipment, but don't let equipment be the reason you don't start. You start and then you upgrade as a reward for being consistent with content. Right. I think that's what I've had to do is I've had to say I can do this with what I have today. And once I've proven that I will do this consistently, then I'll move to the next level as a little treat for me.
Oh, I love it.
Because I've shown that I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And so if you look back at myself in 2018, it's me on a MacBook Pro in OBS with no equipment whatsoever. And then you look at 2020 and I've got more gear. I've got the nicer camera. I've got some lights. You look at me today and I'm running around with a 2-person camera crew and a sound
people
guy.
Following you.
Right. But each one of those has been an incremental escalation, because I've been able to consistently do this now for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I think that, if I get my way in another 4 or 5 years, you're going to be seeing me doing things like full-blown game show productions with set build outs and everything, because that's what I'm working toward. But I know I can't do it today. And if I said I won't go until I can do the game show the way I want to, I'd never make anything. I'd just be planning and thinking and never doing.
Yeah. And spending money.
Right. And it's this is an expensive hobby,
right?
You can sink unlimited funds into production. You can go, if I find the best light, well, the best light is $35,000. Do you need that? No, nobody does. Right?
You need sunlight.
Exactly, right? At that point, that's the light you rent when you're making a feature film, because you need to compete with the brightness of the sun. Right? Nobody needs that light, right? But you can eventually talk yourself into needing this ultra premium gear that's so specialized. I own a Pro Lens. Why the hell do I own a Pro Lens? I don't do that kind of videography. But I was like, well, maybe someday I'll do cool close-ups of my keyboard. I don't do that. But I was like, if I have that, I'd make more stuff, and I don't. It sits in a closet, right? Because it was a way for me to think, to plan instead of doing.
Oh, I love that advice. Don't overcomplicate. You don't need fancy equipment.
Right.
And one thing you said was use that better equipment as kind of level up for you, kind of like a reward.
Yeah.
This is the story of the lesson of the habits book as well, which is give yourself a reward for doing something consistently, and that's how you build a habit. And I think that's a really great takeaway. If you need to do something, just get started. Don't let equipment kind of block you.
Right.
And I think this is a great advice for me, because I'm just using my iPhone camera and this mic that my brother donated to me.
No, I think it's great. This is the perfect way to do this. It's because it's simple. We were able to set it up. We're on the road. We're at Cascadia JS, right?
Yes.
So you didn't have to haul around an extra carry-on bag full of gear.
Yeah.
Which is what I used to try to do.
I'm putting it in a trash can. It's all great. It's working. Nobody needs to know this. Jason, it was such a pleasure having you for a Fireside Chat. I'm so glad I got to spend an hour talking to you.
Yeah, this was a blast.
Yeah, heart to heart, you shared such great insights from your journey, and I always feel inspired after talking to you, and I think this was another one of those conversations which I'm going to remember for a long, long time, and I'm going to take it as a career advice from you.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming, Jason. Bye.